In this morning, if you haven't already. Not mandatory. The seat does not reject you. We do not escort you out of the building, but it is kind of a nice thing to do in that it helps the National 1 Million Cups office kind of track our attendance. So, and it doesn't take too much room on your phone, so please feel free to do so. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. These are the folks that offer us support year after year, and we are very grateful to them. If you see any of them, please give them a socially distanced, appropriate sign of love. Okay. Don't know how else to say that. And if you would like to join their ranks, see any of us that are on the 1 Million Cups Organizer Committee. We usually are tagged with an orange tag and say, hey, I would like to get involved. I'd like to help sponsor 1 Million Cups for the 2021 season. And we would be happy to put your logo up there. All right. Any newbies? Do I have any people who this is your first 1 Million Cups? No. Okay, you're all veterans. So you all, is that, sir, in the front row, is this your first 1 Million Cups? Okay, do you know what 1 Million Cups is? Say no so I can tell you. Okay, thank you. 1 Million Cups. 1 Million Cups is a free weekly event. It is happening in cities across the United States every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. We put an entrepreneur or some sort of group in the community, a community builder on stage. They share their story. We have a Q&A period afterwards. And the whole premise behind 1 Million Cups is, can we change the face of our startup community over 1 million cups of coffee? We don't do the 1 million cups in a single week. So you don't have to power drink the coffee. But over time, we will consume 1 million cups of coffee. Yeah. No, it's okay. Pace yourself. Pace yourself on the 1 million cups of coffee. All right. One of the things, we will have a Q&A period. So we're going to bring in a little while. I'm going to introduce him, but we're going to bring our speaker up on stage. And then at the end, we're going to have a great time for you to be able to ask him questions and offer suggestions. If you're feeling, we're going to have someone running the microphone around for those of you that are here in the room. But if you're feeling a little shy, you'll be able to ask your questions using hashtag 1MCND. And we have someone monitoring social media who will bravely secure that microphone from you and ask that question on your behalf. Also, for those of you that are streaming with us today, if you just enter your question into the chat, we will see that question as well and ask it, not answer it. Adam gets to do that. We will ask it on your behalf. All right. Let's see. So those are that's what 1MC is, rules of engagement. Now, we also, at the beginning of 1 Million Cups, have a couple of other things. The first 1MC of the month, so that would be next week's 1 Million Cups, we have a job board, and that's a relatively new thing for us. So if you have a position that you're looking to hire for, or if you've got multiple positions that are open, we invite you to, you can send us a slide via our Facebook page, or you can show up, grab the microphone, which is really the best because then you can describe the position a little bit. So you can certainly send us those openings, and we'll show them up here on the big screen. But it's really best if you can come and also tell us a little bit about those positions. Okay, and the other thing that we do at the beginning of 1 Million Cups each week is offer an opportunity for community announcements. So, these are not sales pitches, they're not political, but they're just things that are going on in the community that we want you to be aware of. And so I've got a couple of those today, and I think, Lakin, you are up to speak first.
Hi, everybody. Lakin Ani, North Dakota Women's Business Center. You heard me talk about this last week. The North Dakota Women's Business Summit is happening virtually November 10th. We've condensed it. So typically this is a day-and-a-half long program, but we know that Zoom fatigue is real. So we've reduced the ticket price, and we've also shortened the sessions. So we're doing half-hour sessions with the keynote being 45 minutes so that you can kind of come and go as you please. You'll also have access to the recording. So if you can't make it to all the breakouts, you can have access to those recordings and watch at will. So take a look at our agenda when it's available. More information is coming, but mark your calendars for November 10th.
I've got the next one, Kirsten, also with North Dakota Women's Business Center. We have a workshop coming up on cybersecurity here in October. I don't remember the day very well. So check us out on Facebook, or you can get on NorthDakotaWomen'sBusinessCenter.com and DWBC.com. And so it's Eric Giltner and Nicole Evans. Eric is from SBA. Nicole is from SBDC, and they're going to just be talking about the myths and realities of why you ought to have cybersecurity for your business, and probably some how-tos.
Thank you. Okay, and I think I've got one more that is a video, rumor has it.
Hey everybody, Kate from the Downtowners. I had two announcements. One, I want to mention the Main Street Summit. We're going to be doing the Q&A takeover for the keynote on October 7th. And I will be emceeing that with Jeff Speck, who will be the keynote. You can watch that for free. That's October 7th. Otherwise, you can register for the full conference October 6th and 7th. You can register on Eventbrite. Also wanted to mention the Bank of North Dakota has a new loan program, I should say recovery loan program. And essentially what that is if you have interest from a loan or any kind of debt, you could potentially apply to have that essentially as a grant. So check it out, Bank of North Dakota. Also that Main Street Summit. Miss you guys.
Awesome. I have to follow the cat. Oh, this is so hard. All right. We are ready for our main event. So here we go. Our presenter today, I'm super excited about. Every year when we finish up the Disrupt Well Summit, you guys remember I've told you about the summit, and you did a great job with that last week, Tyler. Well, that was yesterday. And we always like to bring one of our Disruptive Innovation Challenge winners to the stage the very next day. And so today we have a real treat for you. He and his partner are winners of this year's Disruptive Innovation Challenge. They're one of our 3 winners. And if you didn't attend the summit, I'm not going to tell you who the other 2 winners were. You're going to have to go. You're going to have to go look. But very, very excited for him to share a very unique business model with you today. And so Adam Zach is here, and his partner John Enright, and they are the creators of what is called Set Your Rent. And what Set Your Rent does, they raise private capital to buy homes for people so they can finally achieve that dream of home ownership. And they are also winners of this year. Well, they were winners of this year's Disruptive Innovation Challenge. And then in 2019, they were winners of the Greater Grand Forks Chamber's Shark Tank. And the 2019, they participated in Innovate ND, and in 2019 got through phase 1 and 2. So very accomplished, have a lot ahead of them as well. And so will you please help me in welcoming Adam to the stage? Adam, the first slide is your video. So as soon as you click, it'll autoplay.
Thank you very much, Janya, and what a pleasure it is to be here today. North Dakota, I think, is just such a fantastic ecosystem for entrepreneurs. All those things that Janya just mentioned is likely the only reason that I personally got started in any of this, because it's a little bit scary. You don't know where to start. So I'll kind of share my story a little bit of where we started, where we're at now, and hopefully provide some insight to any of those that are aspiring homeowners, bankers, or different investors. And as part of this, they had a little video that they came and shot, so I'll start that first just to give you an overview of what we do.
Set Your Rent came about as we were trying to learn a little bit ourselves about the real estate investment process. But the one thing that as we were going through this, we noticed kind of a deficiency in available homes for people that couldn't quite obtain a bank loan. And so what we do is we raise private capital to buy the homes for them and then sell it back to them on a lease option or a contract for deed so that they can finally become a homeowner and use it as a bridge loan until they can refinance with the bank. A lot of the testimonials that we'll get on Facebook or on our Google reviews is, the bank said no and Set Your Rent said yes. But we're kind of taking that service of people that are just tired of renting year to year, throwing their money away on rent. And so when they find us, they say, great, it's finally my house. I finally own it, and I'm on my path towards the American dream through home ownership.
My favorite thing about our new home, I can do whatever I want. Like, I can paint if I want to, I could remodel if I wanted to, and just the fact that it's mine.
Allow you to go shopping for any home that you want. With us, you could find any home on the MLS or for sale by owner. When we're at the closing table and you hand someone a key and they're like, we would have been renting, we would have been kicked out of our place, and now we finally have our home. And I will admit that I've gotten tears and I've gotten hugs. We think that is the best way about going about business.
Any questions? No, I'm just kidding. I was hoping it wouldn't be that easy. So I'll take maybe just 5-10 minutes, go through a few slide decks on what we do and how we came about this. So this is not our first idea of what Set Your Rent is. In fact, the name itself is a little bit misleading. Our entire premises of what we started was that college students could only pick from 20 houses available for rent, and they were very dingy and not very appealing for college students to want to live on. So what we would do is say, go pick any home listed for sale, set your rent price, and we'll go pick one that suits your needs so that instead of looking for 10 homes, you can look at 100 different homes. We started doing that, realizing that they would rent for it for a year and then maybe move out. So this is kind of the version 2.0 where somebody would come to us and say, I don't see anything I like for rent, but I eventually want to own someday. And that's where this new niche has created and came about. And so just as our entrepreneurial journey comes about, you can have a great vision to start with, but we just realized that you got to pivot and move as the market, as you see, and it's just kind of great how you can set a goal, go so far in the path, and then just realize, well, there's something different that you had no idea even existed. One of my favorite stories is telling about Aaron. So Aaron was renting. He's a full-time W-2 loan officer. He works for the National Guard. He's got a family, a wife, couple kids, and he was all pre-approved, ready to finally get on that path of home ownership, was all pre-approved, and then all of a sudden, because he had a side job, his debt-to-income ratio didn't quite match what the underwriter wanted to see. And so they said, sorry, I know you're supposed to move in a week, but we can't close on the home. And I know that's not every bank situation, but for his situation, that was, his worst nightmare. He's about ready to move. He's finally getting into a home that he wants, has everything done right, but because he's an entrepreneur, he was actually somewhat looked at unfavorably, which we would look at as the opposite way. Love entrepreneurs. And so just because you might look different on paper to the government doesn't mean that what you can actually do in real life. And so what we had done is we then reached out to our pool of investors, said, hey, this is the situation. This person's legit. They make good money. They have a good down payment. What would you think? So then we raised private capital. An investor came in, got a certain return on his investment, but instead of like the stock market where you could get hoping for a 2, 5, 10, or 12% return, they're getting something similar to that, but not only that, but now they're actually helping someone get into a home. And so they feel a lot better about that as a private investor who's got some money looking to do this for an individual. And so then with this particular client, we were able to close 1 week later for Aaron and his family. So really the problem that we're trying to solve is this shift from renting to owning. If you want to rent, that is perfectly fine, and those are the people that maybe want to move, they don't want to deal with a house, and that's fantastic. On the other end of the spectrum is most people would buy a home with a mortgage, which is a great low interest rate. I think interest rates are about the lowest that they've ever been, so that's great, fantastic. What's missing that we've noticed is not many people know what a lease option or a contract for deed is. And that's the void that we're really trying to fill. And that is kind of this blend between renting and owning with a bank. And that is where you're building equity in the home. You live in it, you control it, you can do your improvements. And if you live in it for 5 years, if you're renting, all that money would go to the property manager, the owner, and then you would just move out. Whereas a lease option or a contract for deed is just a different way of you building a percent of your monthly payment actually goes towards the principal. If the home does appreciate, you get to capture some of that. So you act more like a homeowner until you can officially get a bank loan. So that's kind of problem number one that we're trying to solve. And then problem number two is on the far left hand here with rentals, those are almost exclusively all owned by investors. right? They're just trying to find a way to tax shelter their money with depreciation, tax laws. All rentals in general are owned by investors. And so as you move further to the right where somebody would buy a home all cash, there's no investor involvement. And so what we're really trying to satisfy is kind of that second or third tier here where the investor is somewhat involved. It's not quite as risky as an overall rental, so they're not quite getting the same returns, but they're still helping someone who's trying to get on that path of home ownership. What we feel like this could look like in the long term is an overall March Madness style matchmaking service. So you have a pool of future homeowners on the left. They're entering in all their criteria, what that could be, what down payment they have, credit score, are they an entrepreneur, what's their rental history been like. You have this pool of investors on the other side. They're entering the same criteria. I want to buy a home in Bismarck. I'm looking for this, return. This is the type of clientele that I'm trying to buy a home for. And why can't that entire process be more open market versus the existing regulations that are in place for either a Fannie Mae, FHA, VA, which are all still great programs, but just maybe adding a little bit of the private sector into that overall lending program. If we look at how that works, number one, I think everyone starts with a bank, which I would also agree is the best first place to start. If a bank doesn't work, go to a credit union. If a credit union doesn't work, try another bank. Whatever source you can, if you can use mom and dad's, as a co-signer, fantastic. For entrepreneurs, I would say that is your number one priority. However, if you're independent, you want to do this yourself, and the bank says, you know what, your credit score isn't this, or we need to see 2 years of federal tax income, or you can't do it, that's when they refer people to Set Your Rent. And the first thing we ask you is, have you tried for a bank loan? Are you sure you can't, work through your credit score with some financial services? So our number one goal is to turn them away if they can go back to the bank or some other institution just to generally work on their financial health, which we think is a good way about doing business. If they still are like, nope, we've crossed all those bridges, we don't want to go that route, we have them fill out an application, we have a 95% approval rate. It might not be the home price that they want. Maybe they want a $500,000 house and they can only afford a $200,000 house. There's some expectations that have to be met there. And then we match make them with the private money to buy the home for them. Our ideal individuals that we are trying to help on the aspiring homeowner side, number one is entrepreneurs. If anyone's in the room that's an entrepreneur and you're trying to, showcase what your past 3 years of taxes are, I get it. Entrepreneurs are trying to show no income on their taxes because who would want to pay 20% of taxes? When the bank looks at that, they would look at that and they would say, well, you don't really, make any money according to your adjusted gross income or your taxable income. And hopefully you can find a bank or a credit union or someone that's, a little bit more creative, but sometimes there's restrictions that we have to follow this rule. We're going to put the numbers in, calculate your debt to income ratio, and it doesn't quite work out, or you need a certain time length. So that's number one. Number two, we've been finding college graduates that maybe have a little bit more debt than what they would have liked, so their debt to income ratio is out of whack. The self-employment kind of goes with the entrepreneurs that most of the time they're averaging your last 3 years. So if you make $10,000, then $20,000, and then $30,000, per month going forward, they're going to average that and say, well, your average is $20,000, whereas, you might be going a little bit faster. Last is just those people tired of renting, with potentially having, a lower credit score or just, really unique situations. And our model is we will not collect any fee, compensation otherwise unless the person we're trying to put into a home actually gets their home. So we're not trying to collect it, in application fees or one-time applications because we outsource all of that. This is strictly us trying to put someone in a home. The reason we feel like this is a good time to get into this is if I imagine my daughter getting into a car with a 40-year-old strange man that's going to drive her across town. 5 years ago, I would have said there was no way that would ever be possible. Now with Uber, this kind of two sorted, drivers plus riders with some sort of integrity and business model in the middle is creating this a lot more affordably. Same thing with Airbnb. Fannie Mae has indicated that the that they might privatize in general. So instead of being more government-based, it being more of an open source platform. And then lastly, on the U.S. house prices, looking at what happened in 2008 when all the money was going out, real estate was going crazy, and then all of a sudden there was a correction. When there is a correction, typically it's tougher to obtain a bank loan. And so we feel like if any of that were to resurface again, Set Your Rent would be kind of in a prime candidate with this privatization where you look at each case individually without having to follow the same regulations as a registered mortgage loan originator. A little bit more about us and kind of where we came from. So my business partner, John, and I grew up in North Dakota all my life, grew up in Dickinson, North Dakota, went to school at UND, was there for 10 years, moved down to Fargo eventually, so I've been in North Dakota my whole life and really just appreciate everything that North Dakota has to offer for entrepreneurs and general ecosystem. And so, we've slowly been accumulating different things as we progress through, but just number one, wanted to say thanks to everyone within the entrepreneurial ecosystem for encouraging other people, because I think that's something that North Dakota has that no one else does. If you talk to someone from Florida or Colorado, it's more, what can I get for you giving me, or for me giving you my time or free advice? And North Dakota is very different. So I just want to encourage that, and thank you for your time. And if anyone has any, or wants to reach out afterwards, here's some of my contact information. And with that, thank you for your time, and hopefully this was helpful.
Okay, Adam, if you'd like to grab the chair over there, and I will join you. And I think we've got Tyler is going to be doing our mic running today. So if you have questions, again, remember, if you're feeling bold, raise your hand. Tyler will find you. If you're feeling a little shy, hashtag 1MCND, or if you're watching us virtually, please go ahead and send in those questions on the chat. That would be fantastic. All right, I am going to kick off the questions, though.
Wonderful.
I get to go first because I have the microphone. So if you would, Adam, a little bit, just a wee bit more background. You gave us a little bit, but I think everyone in the room probably thinks that you are a real estate agent. Aha. So if you give us just a teeny bit more glimpse into how you got where you're at right now.
Sure. So I am a full-time civil engineer, husband, father of two, and this is the side gig. And it's strictly as, a side business, and we're just trying to figure out what problem are we trying to solve. We love working with real estate agents, not a real estate agent ourselves. A lot of times an agent will bring a client to us that says, hey, their financing fell through, can you buy the home for them? And we say, absolutely, would love to work with any real estate agent, with them representing us if a client can't get financing. So that's kind of number one. We've thought about generally getting into it, but right now we would rather just work with all the real estate agents, have them, equally compensated, and go that route. And then same thing, we're not a bank. We encourage everyone to get banks. We love, working with commercial loan officers because they'll help us on some of the lending side. And then on the conventional side, if someone does refer it to us, our number one goal is to get them to refinance with that same bank, 6 months, a year, or 3 years down the road.
And then also, just as you were talking, you described for us, who those ideal clients are that come to you, and you used the word referral a couple of times just in your last couple of sentences. Tell us a little bit more about how do your, on the client side, so people who are looking to buy a home, how did they find you? How do they find Set Your Rent?
That's a good question. Every home that we've bought to date has been a referral. So there's been 9 in North Dakota, 1 in Minnesota, 1 in Illinois, 1 in Oklahoma. And they've all just someone who knew about us through either events like this, someone that had visited our website before. We've tried, doing some smart marketing like Google Ads or Facebook. I don't think we're good at that. We got to learn, just as a young entrepreneur on what that is. So if someone's got advice, I would, be willing to hear that. But really, it's all about these people are doing something cool. So it's either bank agents, but our number one is actually our existing customers, which is by far my favorite. Referral. So the home that we're closing on here in Bismarck a couple weeks ago, came from another referral.
Excellent. So, so now how about on the other side? So you also need investors who like this as an opportunity or looking for a certain return. How do you find your investment pool?
Sure. Those ones, again, are kind of the same thing. There's no secret Facebook or Google ads, especially on that one, because you'll get in trouble with the SEC. This is all, person-to-person interactions, people that are just looking to do something creative. So I maybe incorrectly lump commercial loan officers in with investors, because oftentimes they'll give us a loan to then loan out to someone else, because they would look at an individual that has a W-2 or has a portfolio of real estate, and they say, that person's bankable, whereas a startup entrepreneur might not look as bankable. So we kind of act as a credible source that's kind of in between. But then the most common is just investors that have money sitting in a CD or a market. They don't want to put it in the stock market because they feel like it's either going to go down, they don't understand it, they don't want to put it in bonds. And if it's sitting in a traditional savings account, I think a 5-year CD is 1% or maybe 1.5%. And so when we can promise, or not promise, but when we suggest that we can get them something much higher than that, plus help someone out, someone that's sitting on that sort of cash is a lot more willing to do something, because now they see, hey, I can invest, help this person. If something were to go wrong, it's secured by the house itself, so they can't lose everything. Worst case that we would never want to see, that hasn't happened to date, is if somebody had to move out of the home, but in which case their investment would be secured by the real estate itself. Whereas in the stock market, anything could technically go to zero, whereas real estate, they would have a physical asset that they can cover their risks.
Perfect. And I think we have a question.
Sure do. Thanks for being here, guys. This is very interesting. So far, you're talking about residential real estate, but is there space or a goal maybe to move into the commercial side as well? So instead of helping homeowners, then you help potential business owners get into some space that they might not be able to afford otherwise.
Sure, I could see that if they eventually wanted to own it. Right now, that's not our focus, but if someone was saying, hey, I'm looking at this particular commercial real estate, here's the kind of terms, this is my business model of what I'm trying to do, I would venture to guess that that's outside of our niche, and that, SBA, other, banks that are set up that way. In the future, though, that is a great idea, because really we're in the business of solving unique problems. And so because we're connecting to people, who is it, for me to say that some outside investor wouldn't say, what, I really like this shop, this idea, or what they're doing. I'm willing to invest, in them, and really all we're doing is trying to connect A to B. Right now, we're not maybe set up to go in the commercial space, but I like the idea of potentially being able to do that if somebody were to, input what they're looking for. If it just doesn't happen to be a single-family home, it could be whatever piece of property it is, and maybe somebody doesn't want to go single-family home, they want to go more commercial real estate for whatever reason. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question.
Hi, thank you for being on. It's super cool, Adam. Okay, Kate from social media, Facebook says, does the set your rent model only work in certain markets based on median home prices and a market that's growing so that your investors can make a return?
So that's a good question. So the question being, does it only work in markets that are appreciating, I think is the general piece. What's happening at this transaction is that the investor is selling the home to that individual at a set price over a series of terms. So actually the homeowner gets the benefit or the risk of if the market goes up or down. So it would, just like if you're trying to get a home with a bank, you're kind of assuming that overall you're hoping real estate appreciates, but you're also at the same risk that if housing prices fall, it's on the individual homeowner. And so the investor himself, yes, of course, if everything dropped, they might walk away from the home, which is essentially the 2008 housing crisis. And so making sure that the investor is comfortable in investing in this person, there is a little bit of risk both ways, but eventually the sale of the home is in control of the homeowner, so they absorb the same risk reward versus what it's going for. But so I would say you can do it in any market. It's just what their comfort level is. If they think home prices are going to go up or down, maybe they just want to continue to rent.
Do you have one,
I have a question, Adam. Thanks for being with us this morning. Really interesting model. One question I have is when you look at banks and why they're turning down potential home buyers, is there's too much risk for them. They can't make money on it, they've determined. So how, between you and your investors, how do you manage that risk and distribute that risk in the event of a default?
Sure. So I would say, number one, our model is more expensive than a bank, and that is how we mitigate our risk. with this, it's essentially playing some odds that, if we can buy 100 homes and 2 of them default, the 100 outweigh the 2 that did default, so you can cover our losses. Banks in general are kind of doing the same thing with foreclosures, except for they're targeting a less risky population, so they're hoping that 0 default out of 100, whereas, we can build a little bit more risk into our model, and that's why our model is more expensive, yet you can still, get into that home ownership, so it's kind of just a value versus price point. But I would argue that in the eyes of the bank, they are riskier. In our eyes, if someone has, a 10 or 20% down payment, that risk in our eyes is that amount is worth way more than whatever your credit score is. I would rather have someone that can put down $40,000 on a $200,000 house that has a 400 credit score than someone that puts $0 down that has an 800 credit score, just from an overall risk mitigation standpoint, because if something were to go wrong, you have actual cash on hand.
So I think right now this is a side hustle for you and John. Where do you and John see Set Your Rent in maybe 3 years, 5 years? What does that future look like?
Sure. I alluded to earlier that you can have a great grand vision and then it will likely change. So our current vision is continue serving people at the small level. So we've done, 12 homes, have 9 investors. If we just serve 100 people extremely well, continue to get, raving fans and video testimonials, that is like the number one goal, is just continue on the small level. If that continues to improve, I could see some sort of idea of privatizing the whole mortgage industry, where you have not only governments and banks and credit unions, but you have nonprofits, private investors, all fueling this to potentially open market the interest rate. So it's not 3% because the Federal Reserve said so. It's because that's what people are willing to invest in a home. Maybe you can get something less than 2.5%. If somebody's like, this person is incredible, as long as I get 1%, I'm willing to do it. So that overall interest rate would just be driven more by economics than federal regulations. And so part 2 of that is we've had individuals reach out and say, how can I, as another aspiring homeowner, take this on? And so we've opened up some different opportunities in Wisconsin and Florida where they're taking our same business model, trying to replicate it in other areas, and basically proving that it's not just North Dakota or us that can do it, but we're trying to teach others how to do this so that we can replicate it. And if that's the case, then we'll scale a lot faster.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we have a question. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you. Dot Frank with the Mandan Progress Organization. I've just got 2 questions. The first is on that bracket that you showed where you're pairing a potential homeowner with an investor. Do you pair them 1-to-1, or do you also accept pools of funds to help purchase the home for that individual? And then my second question is, how do you receive compensation?
Sure. 2 good questions. So number 1, the first answer is SEC does not like us pooling funds, and if we go that route, that is a much more complicated route, as my current opinion from what our attorneys tell us. So right now it's transactional 1-to-1, and it's just secured through real estate. Number 2, as far as an overall compensation, we have 2 different models where, one, we retain ownership and we have a note with the investor, so they just have a fixed projected rate of return at a fixed amount that they're just getting. But if something were to happen, our company or our LLC that we've created is still on the hook. The second way is if we truly assign our agreement, our interest in the home, not as an agent or a broker, just our interest in the home, to an investor, and the investor, if the homeowner is A and the investor is B, we just connect A to B. We take a one-time transactional fee, just like a wholesaler would for buying a home at a discount and assigning it to an investor who's going to, rehab the property. So number 1 is kind of staying in the middle and owning it, and number 2 is just transactional, where we're assigning and just connecting the 2 and then pulling out. Those are very detailed, good questions. So I'm hoping I'm doing that justice. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question. Kirsten.
Hi, this is Pedro from Facebook. How much savings do you want a potential customer to be in order to get into your program? Debt, ratio, range, etc.
Sure. So I would say everybody's financial situation is a little bit unique, but if I was using overall generalities, we would want to see at least a $5,000 down payment or 10% kind of down payment as a minimum. Debt to income ratio would not want to see anything higher than like the 43% that's commonly used. We set up people individually to try not to go more than 1/3 of their gross monthly income exceeding their mortgage payment. And I may have said that backwards, but essentially we're not trying to set them up so that, you know, they make $4,000 a month and they're paying $3,000 a month, you know, towards their mortgage. We want, you know, 1/3 of the $4,000, or let's say, if I'm doing the quick math in my head, you know, something just north of $1,000 as their mortgage payment, so that they still have food and other things that they can pay off. So in general, we function more so on income and down payment and less on credit score and past history of bankruptcies and eviction, as long as you're kind of on the path towards progression.
We have a question here.
Let me understand. So as you guys are setting up this program for a homeowner, is everything pretty much the same as if you buy a typical home with a lender, that you set up an escrow and all of that? You help them work through that? Give me kind of a vision on how that works with your guys' program.
It would look simpler. So number one, we don't have escrow. And so and there's two different ways. If it's a lease option where they're the renter with the option to purchase, we would still pay taxes and insurance on the property because it's technically a rental with them having the option to buy. If it's a contract for deed, it's a sale of the agreement. And so they are paying their own taxes and insurance however they want to do it, you know, yearly, you know, 2 6-month installments, monthly, however they want to pay insurance. That's all on them, you know, to do. Really, the only payment that we're receiving is the same one, you know, payment that you would have normally to your bank. It's just we set up through Cozy where they make their one-time payment, their monthly payment, whatever the amount is, and then they can even check to record that to the TransUnion Credit Bureau so they can build their credit as they're making their payments through this program. So it may function similar to that, but we don't technically go into escrow like a normal lending situation would.
Ideally, how long would someone stay with you before you're hoping they could transition back to a normal bank loan?
0 days.
Oh,
but
okay, yeah, that's a good point.
But in general, you know, so yeah, that's what we always say is if you can get a bank loan, way low, you know, way better option, right? Because it's the lowest interest rate. These are just for those people that are frustrated because they can't get into a home. So really, what we're encouraging them to do is take the financial steps that you need to do, whether it's credit score, whether it's income, whether it's taxes, whether that's, you know, just convincing the lender. So most of these we're trying to set up that in less than 5 years for sure that they're doing this, but we set it up that we will never kick someone out of a home, you know, if they want 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, because what we found in the industry is what the competitors are doing is they're setting up these people on 6-month terms. Sure, give me $10,000, you know, you can refinance in 6 months, right? And as you know, as they're giddy to get a new house, they're like, sure, I'll sign that. And then after 6 months, you can't fix a credit score that quickly. So then these investors are taking the home back along with the down payment for some people. And I think that is just borderline criminal, even though it's legal.
You're really setting them up for a longer-term financial success because they're starting to build their track record with you.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think we have another question.
In general, what do the interest rates look like in comparison to those bank loans for people?
I would say it's a tough situation to answer, but I would say somewhere between 5 and 10% as of right now. And so that would be the simple answer without getting too specific.
So another question. You know, all entrepreneurs kind of experience that roller coaster ride, right? These amazing highs and these incredible lows. So if you'd be willing to share, what have been some of those high points for you and John? Maybe something you didn't even anticipate were going to be the side benefits of creating Set Your Rent. And what have been some of the most significant challenges that you two have faced?
Sure. I would say the first challenge was just generally getting into real estate. We thought we could do the HGTV thing, realized that we are terrible at that. Buy a home, you think you can fix it up and you can rent it? Absolutely not our game. We learned a lot. So then it was kind of, you know, the first, let's say, 3 homes that we bought, I don't think we're going to make any money on, right? So we're trying to do this side business to make, you know, money, right? But your first 3 things are complete, you know, disasters. But so you could either just say, well, I'm done and I'm no longer doing this thing, or you can say, okay, well, how do I not do that again? So it's like, okay, well, buy properties that are already nice. And then it was, okay, how do we get a renter in there day one so that it doesn't sit vacant for 2 or 3 months, because that kind of kills your profit. So that was kind of the epiphany. And then once somebody reached out to us and said, hey, I'm renting this, but can I eventually own it? Then we, you know, basically educate ourselves. And I would say that is probably one of the high points is, you know, we would search for everyone. If anyone else offers this program of, you know, trying to do these lease option or contract for deeds, and it's, you know, sparingly out there, but we just like the idea that it was pretty disruptive, and, you know, enjoy the fact that North Dakota and everyone else, you know, has been supporting this. But by far the number one is the testimonials that we get on Google reviews, or the video testimonials that we get on YouTube, because it is, although I can, you know, find some satisfaction in designing a drinking water treatment facility that's providing water to everyone, when someone gives you a hug and realizes that, like, they have a home that, you know, they were renting a trailer house for however long, you know, beforehand, and they couldn't do anything and they thought they were in a bad situation, that for sure has been a high point.
Oh, that's great. We have another question.
Kate asks from Facebook, does the model also work with mobile homes?
The short answer is not yet. We're trying to not do that because there's a difference between owning the home and owning the land. And if you can get into a situation where you can have both, then we would consider it. But because there gets to be some interesting equity and title versus, you know, an asset that's not secured on a property, the appraisal, the evaluation is difficult, because the mobile home is often treated like a vehicle where it depreciates in value as opposed to appreciates, because if you don't own the land. So in general, we're trying to avoid that, not, you know, one, from our own risk perspective, but number 2, from theirs, in that if they're in a home that they don't own the land and it's a depreciating value, that is tough for them to gain equity long term, because I believe in real estate long term. Yes, it might go down, you know, and up through the seasons, but if you own that for 5, 10, or 20 years, paying off the principal, amortizing it, hopefully getting 1%, 2%, 3% appreciation, over 5 years, you're going to see that spread where you might not be able to see in the mobile home. So we have yet to find a solution for that.
Are there ways that you've used technology to kind of speed up the process for you guys, or?
We tried, and we realized that we weren't quite there yet. That kind of matchmaking idea, we thought we could automize everything, have a sign-up form for the homeowners, have a sign-up form for the investors, but when you're only doing a deal a month, sometimes it's easier just to pick up the phone and call them. And so long term, I could definitely see tech playing a role, but for now, because of how large of a deal this is, you know, we're not trying to do a huge volume. We're not trying to sell 1 million hamburgers like McDonald's. We're trying to do a deal a month, because it's a high value but low quantity service. So we feel like doing the personal reach outs and having those conversations are currently the best strategy, even though long term we may leverage some sort of, you know, website matchmaking service, kind of like Match.com, or what, you know, pick your dating site.
So Adam, with your kind of 2 pools of stakeholders, you have investors, you have home buyers, is it hard finding either of them, or is one more challenging than the other, or do you have a pretty, I guess, good pipeline there?
Sure. The pendulum kind of swung back and forth. It used to be we'd find one person, we'd say, oh, great, and then we'd have 10 more, and we'd say, well, we can't, you know, finance that ourselves because we don't have the capabilities. So then we would try to, you know, bring the attention to investors, and then a lot of them would do one and they'd be like, okay, that's great, I've figured out how it works, now I want to do more. And so now, right now, the pendulum has probably swung the other way, where we can take on more volume of homes because we're fairly selective, where we're not just going to say yes to everyone, but we're trying to do, you know, who's the right fit, who can we do either this month or this year, how many homes can we buy based on our criteria. So right now we have more capacity to potentially buy homes than what our, investors are currently want to go in there, but in general, it's kind of a both sides got to elevate at the same time. Thank you. Good question.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, on the home buyer side, what's your conversion rate there? For how many people have come to you through your referral network? How many have you gotten into a home, and how many have you had to turn down?
So for, we have a 95% approval rating saying here's your max purchase price for what you can get into it. Out of those, half of them decided to go somewhere else. Number one, they either just went and found a bank, waited long enough, or are kind of in a holding pattern. For those that did go through, the 12 that we've gone through and approved, our goal was to, try to get them to refinance as soon as they could. COVID happened, which really screwed up a lot of things just with overall refinancing. And so the hope was to get more people to refinance back out sooner. But luckily, nobody's in forbearance. We haven't had to do any, foreclosures or anything like that. But there is, on a routine basis, people that find us that haven't really submitted a full application. They're like, here's my situation. I don't have an income. I don't have a down payment, but I'm really passionate about this idea. And those are the hard ones that you kind of have to say no to. That, yes, do I believe that you could do this? Absolutely, but I can't verify it other than, with words on what we can do. And so that's usually the amount of people that we have to turn down, is when they don't have any income and they don't have any down payment. Those are the ones where we say, okay, we have the Village Family Resource Center in Fargo, which we've done some interviews with. That's a nonprofit that we just, that we're not affiliated to, that we think is just a great service, where they just help, people get their financial house in order, try to build up the Dave Ramsey program to get your emergency savings, kind of squared away. So really it's just referring them out to other mortgage lenders or financial resources to try to just say, it's not necessarily no, which is, hey, not yet. Come to us 3-6 months. And what we've noticed is it's not like transactional where somebody finds us, we buy a home as quick as it is Aaron. A lot of times it's like, hey, I didn't realize that this existed. And then they find us 6 months later, 9 months later, 12 months later, like, hey, you remember that we talked? And, can we still do this? And that has been probably the majority of them, where we didn't realize that the lifetime customer cycle is that long. We kind of thought, oh, they'd find us, they'd want to move forward. But no, are they legit? It's probably the first question that we get asked, because there's so many rent-to-own furniture scams or whatever it would be on homes. And so, just getting over that first hurdle by doing events like this, putting out free content or doing videos or trying to help them out in the first place is probably the first barrier that we have to get across. But then it's just kind of a longer process and timing out the spring or summer buying cycle that many people might want to move into.
Oh, Kirsten, it looks like you have another question.
Yeah, it's just interesting to hear you talk about your relationship with your customers. Is there a certain way that you approach keeping in contact with them? Do you find that they reach out to you more so, or is there a way that you're nurturing those leads?
So when you say our existing customers or our potential customers?
Potential
Customers. Yeah, so kind of the first thing is we ask them to fill out some information that kind of puts them into a, this isn't a good fit right now, or maybe, or a, hey, you're a really good fit. And so depending on what bucket that they fit into, we nurture those buckets differently. If they're not a good fit now, it's like, hey, connecting them with resources. If it's a maybe, we're asking, some more questions, asking what kind of questions they have of us to get to know us better, so that maybe their initial information, they miss something, so we can, move them one way or the other. And then for those that the criteria fits perfectly, they're like, yep, I got a divorce. I understand that it, wrecked my credit, but I have this much for a down payment, but I don't have a job. How can I still do something? And that's where we have just, one-on-one talks, do a lot of email exchanges, try to, share as much information on how the process works, because there is an education piece that I think is extremely lacking. Because if I say the words lease options and contract for deed, I think it's kind of like when somebody says, how does credit work or how does escrow work? People have heard it enough, but they kind of just nod along and they're like, I don't really know what that means, but I've heard it. I just don't know exactly the mechanics of how it works, so we try to educate them on what that is.
So this is maybe a little follow-up question on that. You know, you had the slide where you showed the gradient from pure rental to just paying cash, and you're playing in that space. Who else plays within that space? So who would you view as your major competitors? Not partners, but really competitors in that niche you're trying to serve.
Sure. So the number one is what I hate to call them a competitor, but they're good at what they do, is renttoown.org. And what they do is they own the first Google page of rankings, but under different URL names. So homefinder.com, rent to own, rent to own, rent before owning. They own all of those, and they funnel you into the same revenue source, which is $1, free trial, and then $50 a month to get access to potential homes that are lease options or contract for deeds. And I think what they're doing is a genius business model, because then they're just scraping Zillow, Craigslist, Trulia for sale by owners. And they're saying, hey, here's a bunch of homes that people potentially will offer as rent to own. But those homeowners themselves haven't said, yes, I want to do a rent to own. They're just saying, hey, here's the potential. And so then their revenue model isn't really connecting them, but it's just access to information. And so I think that's a little bit deceiving, but they're really good at what they do. They own the number one Google ad page. They own the full SEO page. So, and they do it all across the United States. So they're really good at what they do. Secondly is, there are just individual homes in Bismarck that you can do rent to own or contract for deed if you find Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and maybe a few other smaller groups. Like on Zillow, they're like, yeah, I'm actively looking for a rent to own. I searched before I came, and I think there was just like two homes available. And so when somebody's like, oh, I want to do this, but there's two homes, that kind of deflates them a little bit, because now they're more attracted to the rent to own idea than they are the actual house. And then they're not quite as excited about it as if they were to pick their own house. Then the third competitors are local small sub niche markets. Like in Minnesota, there's the Contract for Deed crew, who does pretty much what we do, except for raising private capital. They buy all the homes themselves, and they have a real estate agency. And I would say that is a true measure of a competitor, because I think they're actually doing it right. They're actually trying to buy a home and give it to people. And so what we found is there's these sub-niche of actual competitors trying to do good in the world, and we're just trying to, help in that market share, but potentially grow larger.
Oh, that's great. We have another question. Yes.
I actually have come to retire in Bismarck, but my prior career ended up by default selling homes for 30 years out of state. And so when I'm listening to you and hearing you say you've got most of your business by referrals, are you reaching out to the real estate community, number one, and number two, I call it the loan officer community, because they're intimate with their clients, they, help them, and then they go, sorry, you're bust, we can't do it for federal regulations or whatever. So have you tapped those two markets? Because I see those as upping your referrals by quite a bit.
We have started to, based on some previous advice, but I don't think we have done a good enough job. We've maybe told 5 people about it and got, a couple referrals from it. And so that is a fantastic idea that we need to do a lot more. I'm hoping you can give me the answer. Oh. Sure. No, I appreciate it. Just for those that can't hear it, the question was, have you worked more with real estate agents and loan officers to build those relationships? And the answer was, we're starting to. And the gentleman, Aaron, was actually referred to by a mortgage loan officer where he said, I just can't do it.
Yeah, I have a question that piggybacks on that one again. But you said the goal is 1 transaction a month right now, right? So I'm wondering, when you and John are looking at this, what does Set Your Rent look like? If it's 5 years from now, Set Your Rent is exactly what you want it to be. How many transactions a month are you doing, or is this going to kind of stay as a side hustle of a sort?
Sure. In a perfect world, I think we would just be matchmaking people, and it would be the lowest interest rate an investor is willing to invest in an individual person or a business. And so right now our profit or our interest rates have to be high because we're mitigating risk because we're not doing it on a large economies of scale. But long term, if we were just connecting A to B and there was a really attractive, when somebody asked, what's our interest rate, 5 to 10%, that would be fantastic if there was someone who's like, I just want to put all my money into Bismarck housing, and if I can get 3 or 4%, that's great, and I don't need the same criteria. That would be a fantastic end goal for us just with the business on who we could help and what kind of service they could do. And then if we can play a role in, playing that matchmaker to kind of make sure that both sides understand what's going on and play fair, that would be a good 5-year goal for us.
Fantastic. Well, I think we have come to that time. Yes?
Okay.
We always ask the same last question every week, and it is Tyler's honor to ask it.
Thank you, Janya. So, Adam, the last question we ask every week is, how can our 1 Million Cups community here in Bismarck and Mandan best support you and set your rent moving forward?
Good question. I would say, number one, tell us where we're completely missing the mark. If you're like, hey, I listened to your talk, I asked some good questions, but I don't think this is going to work for reasons X, Y, or Z, would love to hear constructive feedback. And then on the other side, if you do think this is a great program, sharing this with other agents and bankers, which will probably just steal a question, from the audience, sharing the awareness of, hey, this exists, and allowing potential customers or investors to educate themselves or reach out and determine for themselves if this is a good fit, I would say would be 2 fantastic things that the Bismarck Mandan community could help us with. That would be great.
Fantastic. Well, we'll do our best.
Thank
Would
you.
you please join me in giving it up here for... Wonderful. Thank you so much. And
Thank you so much for having
congratulations.
me.
Well, and congratulations on winning the Disruptive Innovation Challenge yesterday as well. Please join us next week. Next week is our Main Street crossover, if you will. And so we're going to be virtually streaming that event, and that's also free. So join us for that. And otherwise, and I forgot to mention, out there, there were some, I'm calling it my 1 million buttercups, buttercup squash. They're from my garden. I have way more than I can possibly eat. So please, take a buttercup squash on your way out today. I would deeply, deeply appreciate that. You as well. You get to take one to Fargo.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great questions.